Yusa is a regular lonely loser and he did not even lose his V card, so one day, he wants to change something and he playing with his joystick even more. But everything flips when he ends up moving into the same dorm as her crush lives in and he tries every third-class move. For only he can to get closer. But he has some hot and crazy roommates constantly ruin his chances at making a clapping session. The story starts with Yusa heading to the library to return some books. While he's there, he gets completely drawn in by a hot-looking girl named Kawai, who's reading alone. He instantly gets hard eyes and hides behind a shelf just to stare at her and taking out his joystick to play with it. But right when he's caught in the moment, one of his friends pops up and asks if he's really getting his own apartment. Yusa brags a little, saying he kind of guilt-tripped his parents into giving him money for a small room. But by the time he checks again, Kawai is already gone. Shrugging it off, he heads out to find the boarding house he's moving into. Soon, he ends up in a quiet old part of town, filled with nostalgic houses, thinking his life's about to get chill. But things get weird when he sees this super sketchy guy named Shirasaki spying on schoolgirls. When Shirasaki calls out to him, Yusa panics and tries calling the cops. Luckily one shows up. He runs straight to the hostel, where the landlady, Sumiko, gives him a quick tour and shows him his new room. As soon as he steps in, Yusa is stunned. It's way bigger than he imagined. But before he can settle in, Sumiko casually slides a plastic divider down the middle of the room and tells him he's actually going to have a roommate. The next second, Shirasaki shows up out of nowhere, puts a hand on his shoulder, and greets him with a creepy smile. Yusa almost faints from shock and seriously considers going back to live with his parents. But just as he reaches the front door, he freezes. Standing right there is the same girl he crushed on back at school. When he finds out Kawai lives in the same house, he instantly flips the charm switch and starts trying to impress him. But she's not interested in losers, so she instantly rejects him. Kawai pulls out a wooden sword and tells him to back off because the girl's area is off limits. Then Sumiko steps in and says no, guys are allowed near the girl's house. Isn't turning into clapping home? Tell me in the comment guys, if you got point. A bit later, Yusa gives his mom a call, begging for more cash so he can find a better place to live. But instead of helping, she roasts him, just like I'm roasting you guys. He just hangs up and accepts his sad little fate. After chilling with Sumiko over some tea and learning about how the hostel runs, he ends up lurking near the girls' hallway, trying to catch a glimpse of Kawai. Just as he's getting into full stalker mode, Shirasaki pops up and totally ruins the moment. The next few days are pure chaos. Yusa keeps dealing with one weird thing after another, until he surprisingly gets used to it all. He adjusts so well that Shirasaki actually starts talking to him like a normal person. He even compliments Yusa for staying chill, and says he'll get along fine with the others. But Yusa brings him back to reality, saying not to expect too much. Kawai still acts like he doesn't even exist. As they talk about how lively she is around other people, Shirasaki shows him a pic of another resident named Miharu. Just then, Sumiko shows up asking for help with something, but ends up yelling at Shirasaki so fiercely that the guy's practically living his dream. After witnessing that mess, Yusa decides he needs to reset his brain and walks to the beach, where he spots a girl screaming her loud out about some cheating boyfriend. At first, he just watches like it's free entertainment, but then he notices she's totally wasted and might fall into the ocean. He rushes to help and is shocked when he realizes it's Miharu. She suddenly stumbles into him, pressing her body close, giving him a glimpse of heaven, and playfully asks if he wants to lose his V card with her. Before things get more wild, Kawai appears out of nowhere and bonks Miharu on the head, warning Yusa to stay away when she's drunk. But then Miharu climbs up the stairs just to slide down like a maniac. That's when Kawai finally snaps, charges up the steps, and tries to beat some sense into her but ends up slipping, and the two crash straight into Yusa's rocket launch pad. Later, Sumiko yells at Miharu for being reckless and asks why she even came back early from her trip. After her dramatic rant, Sumiko makes dinner, but while eating, Yusa rubs his sore jaw. Kawai quietly apologizes for hurting him, and then out of nowhere, Miharu says he can have some milk from his milk factory as a reward for breaking their fall. One morning over breakfast, Sumiko casually brings up holiday plans, asking what everyone's up to. That's when Yusa suddenly realizes he doesn't actually have a life outside obsessing over Kawai. As the conversation goes on, Sumiko says she'll be out all day, handling some stuff, and tells Kawai she's in charge of the house. Not long after, Shirasaki comes creeping up, trying to get Yusa interested in some weird invention he's working on. But Yusa is so not into it that honestly rather sulk in a corner than hang out with that weirdo. Shirosaki insists it's just a quick trip to grab glycerin from the store, but Yusa still nopes out and heads off to buy a soda instead. On his way back, he pauses near the girls' hallway and thinks about how he hasn't seen much of Miharu lately. That's when she randomly starts crawling toward him like some horror movie scene, and he nearly jumps out of his skin. She starts mumbling about how life is pointless, so he crouches down to talk her through it only to realize she's way too far gone for a normal conversation. Before he can say much, Shirosaki starts shouting for them to come outside. They follow the noise and find him blowing bubbles like a man-child. Miharu gets distracted instantly and completely forgets about her little breakdown. Soon, everyone's goofing off with the bubbles, just messing around. That's when Kawai comes back from the library and freezes when she sees Miharu floating inside a giant bubble like it's totally normal. Yusa notices her reaction and casually asks if she wants to join. She acts all cold and robotic again, pretending she's too mature for this kind of thing. But instead of leaving, she sits on the porch awkwardly twitching, clearly holding back. Yusa catches on and jokes that she'd be doing them a favor by joining. When they manage to float a bubble around her, her expression suddenly brightens, and Yusa's heart practically explodes. But then pop. The bubble bursts, soap gets in her mouth, and she starts wiping her tongue in a super weird way that sends Yusa's brain straight into thinking how she eat ice cream. Tell me in the comment, guys, how's your girlfriend eat your ice cream? Sorry, guys, because you don't have a girlfriend. And makes him crouch fast to hide his long joystick. Sadly, for Yusa, both Miharu and Shirosaki catch on to his little situation and start messing with him non-stop. Just when things are about to get worse, Kawai notices and slaps him hard enough to reset his whole brain. A few days later, Yusa finds himself lying on the floor, absolutely done with life, while Miharu forces Shirosaki to pretend they're a couple because they refuse to watch a horror movie with her. When Sumiko finally walks in and asks what on earth is going on, Miharu explains that a coworker wouldn't stop bragging about her perfect love life, which reopened the wounds in her lonely heart. Feeling bad, Sumiko decides to go all out and transforms the entire house into a spooky haunted house, just so Miharu can enjoy the horror movie to the fullest. As soon as Kawai sees what's happening, she tries to escape to the comfort of her books. But once everyone starts telling scary ghost stories and the hallway to her room looks like it came out of a horror film, she ends up staying for the movie anyway though. She keeps her face buried behind a pillow the entire time. Seeing this as his moment to shine, Yusa tries acting brave to impress her, but one terrifying scene later, he pees himself right next to her, killing the vibe instantly. Miharu then takes Kawai to the restroom and tries to prove there's nothing to be afraid of. But as soon as they turn the corner, something or rather someone jumps them. Yusa, Sumiko, and Shirosaki rush in to help, only to freeze when they spot a wild girl clinging to Miharu like a madwoman. The new girl, Sayaka, introduces herself like she's totally normal, saying she just gets really affectionate with her friends. Yusa, overwhelmed by her looks, starts getting mentally fried. But Miharu quickly snaps him back to reality, warning him not to be fooled. Sayaka may look normal, but she's full-on insane. Yusa, however, becomes convinced she might be the most normal person he's met since moving in. A few days later, Yusa blows all his savings on a brand new bicycle and tries to soak in the joy of finally buying something with his own money. But before he can even take it for a spin, Miharu and Shirosaki hijack it for a joyride. When they finally return it, Yusa snaps, calling her out for being super inconsiderate, especially since she went on a double ride before he even had a chance to touch the thing. Trying to tease him, Miharu brags about how she used to ride double all the time back in high school. But mid-sentence, the reality hits her like a brick. High school was probably the best time of her life, and now everything feels kinda downhill. She instantly goes quiet, sunk in her own sadness. Right after that, Shirosaki decides to turn the bike's backseat into one of his bizarre projects, wrapping it up in ropes and making it weird. While Yusa struggles to undo the mess, Kawai walks in with Sayaka. As soon as Sayaka sees the bike, she turns to Kawai and casually asks if she'd like to ride to school with Yusa every day. Trying to play it cool, Yusa says he'd be totally fine with it, but when Kawai glances at the seat and sees the sketchy stuff still tied to it, she immediately nopes out and walks straight to her room. That moment hits with very big emotional damage. For the first time, he starts to understand how Miharu must feel when her heart gets stomped on. Picking up on the mood, Sayaka asks if he actually likes Kawai. But Yusa, clearly flustered, denies it and mumbles something about just being nice and dashes inside to escape the conversation. The next morning, Kawai actually talks to Yusa outside and not just a short reply either. For once, it's a proper conversation that lasts more than 10 seconds. Instead of taking the win and letting it be, our lovesick hero decides this is his moment. So, he shoots his shot again and offers to ride her to school. She responds, with a stare so cold, it could freeze time, and it crushes what little hope Yusa had left in his already broken heart. Flustered, he apologizes for even thinking she'd say yes, then speeds off on his bike, trying to outrun his own embarrassment. Surprisingly, Kawaii starts to feel kinda bad about the whole thing. Right after, Sayaka and Miharu show up and start teasing her relentlessly. Annoyed, Kawaii reminds them that the whole hostel actually belongs to her family, and she could triple their rent anytime she feels like it. That shuts them up real quick. Later at school, Yusa ends up stuck with library duty again and quietly hopes he doesn't bump into Kawaii like always. But, just his luck, she walks right up to him and apologizes for how harsh she was earlier. She explains that it's not about him, she just doesn't want people making fun of her for riding to school with a guy. Seeing how much effort she's putting in just to explain, Yusa tells her it's fine and not to worry about it. Just like that, Kawaii goes back to her usual blank expression. That evening, Yusa comes home from running errands only to witness total chaos. Sumiko, bouncing on Shirasaki's back like it's some sort of punishment game. While Sayaka tries to grab Miharu's assets, Miharu quickly covers up and scolds Yusa for staring, only to realize he was actually looking at Kawaii the whole time. Jealous, she clocks him hard enough to almost unhinge his jaw. After making sure his face still works, Yusa goes over to ask Kawaii why she's crying. She brushes it off, says it's nothing, and quietly walks away. Out of nowhere, Miharu gets a phone call. But instead of handling it like her usual strong, no-nonsense self, she starts freaking out, and that's when everyone figures out it must be her cheating ex. Just a simple message asking to hear her voice turns her from confident queen to emotional wreck in seconds. The next day, Miharu suddenly starts using skincare again, like she's prepping for a date. Shirasaki, being his usual inappropriate self, jokes about whether her ex was that good in bed. He tries to brush it off and says she's still totally in control, but then sprints off to answer another call. Seeing all this, Yusa sighs and silently admits she might be a lost cause. But later that evening, when he gets back from school and sees Miharu all dressed up to go out, he decides to give it one last shot. He reminds her how badly she was hurting not too long ago and even says Sumiko is cooking her favorite dinner tonight. But Miharu insists it's just a casual meetup, she just wants to hear what the guy has to say. On her way out, she runs into Kawaii, who surprisingly asks, "Are you actually happy?" This totally catches Miharu off guard, since Kawaii never shows interest in anyone's love life, especially hers. A bit later, Miharu meets up with her so-called Prince Charming. But just a few minutes into the date, he drops the usual sleazy, Lenny asking if she wants to head back to his place for, have some fun. She tries to laugh it off, but he keeps pushing. And that's when something clicks. Suddenly, Miharu remembers she has dignity. She stands up, looks him straight in the eyes, and tells him to forget ever laying a finger on her divine self again. The next evening, Yusa comes back from school and is stunned when he spots some guy getting a little too aggressive with Sayaka outside. Just as he's about to speak up, Sayaka runs over to him and acts all apologetic, telling the guy she's sorry for making him think she could ever fall for a total NPC like Yusa. That obviously doesn't go well. The guy instantly assumes Yusa is trying to steal Sayaka's heart and grabs him by the shirt, threatening to knock out every last tooth in his mouth. While Yusa tries to calm things down, Sayaka doubles down and pretends like the two of them actually have some secret thing going on, making it 10 times worse. Just when things start spiraling, Kawaii hurls her book right at the guy's back. For a moment, it looks like she's stepping in to help, but she quickly brushes it off, saying the book just slipped, then walks inside, like she didn't just save Yusa's life. The angry guy, not done yet, turns around and accuses Yusa of messing with Kawaii's heart too. In full panic mode, Yusa blurts out that he's literally a clueless virgin who can barely talk to girls. Before things get any more awkward, Shirasaki shows up and saves him from completely crashing his social stats. Later on, Yusa catches up with Kawaii and quietly thanks her for the book toss. She just says, "Don't worry about it," but Yusa keeps going on about how amazing she is until she gets annoyed and storms off. Thinking he might have ruined everything, Yusa starts to stress, but then Sayaka casually tells him that Kawaii isn't used to compliments and might just be a little lonely. Feeling hopeful again, Yusa dashes off ready to plan his next move. Right as Miharu tells Sayaka to stop messing with Yusa's emotions, Sumiko gently holds her face and calmly reminds her she's one bad move away from getting kicked out and living on the street. The next day after school, Yusa waits at the crosswalk, pretending like he's just heading out at the same time as Kawai, trying not to look like a desperate stalker. Of course, Kawai sees right through his awkward act, but decides to let it slide. Still, Yusa won't stop talking about random nonsense, so she sarcastically asks if his bike got a flapping. He gets the hint that she wants space. Unfortunately, Yusa's brain refuses to pick up the signal. Instead of backing off, he takes it as a sign that she wants to listen and puts even more energy into chatting. When Kawai finally shuts her book to hear him out, Yusa feels like Sayaka was totally right, maybe he really does have a chance. Later that evening at the hostel, Sumiko asks if anyone wants to try a drink her friend gave her. When Miharu says no, everyone gasps like they've seen a ghost. After all, she usually downs vodka like it's her morning coffee. That's when Kawai jokingly asks if she's dating another sketchy guy again. Miharu says she's just trying to be a bit healthier now. Hearing that, Sayaka complains that if Miharu loses weight, her chest won't feel as soft. Miharu, without missing a beat, claps back and promises to burn every last bit of fat on her body just to make sure there's absolutely nothing left for Sayaka to grab. Right after that, Miharu gets a call and casually says it's just a friend. While she steps away to answer, Sumiko starts pouring drinks for Sayaka and Shirosaki, trying to keep the mood light. But moments later, Miharu comes storming back in, slams the phone down, grabs Shirosaki's cup, and knocks him out cold with it, yelling about how much she hates the girls in her friend group. Everyone's shocked, and asks what poor Shirosaki did to deserve that. Miharu explains that she started dieting just to hang out with one of her hot friends, the same one who always bragged about being in the perfect relationship. But now, that friend just called and cancelled their plans, because she got dumped too. After realizing she probably didn't need to knock Shirosaki unconscious, Miharu admits that some friendships just don't last. That's when Sayaka chimes in, saying she totally gets it. But Sumiko immediately calls her out, saying her idea of friendship is built on being addicted to attention and chaos. Sayaka, unbothered, fires back, claiming at least she tries to have relationships, unlike someone they all know who's way too obsessed with books and her fantasy mafia boyfriend. Yusa stepping in like a hero to defend Kawai, but Kawai, calmly and honestly, explains herself. She says she chose to shut herself off and escape into fiction because even basic conversations with real people felt too overwhelming. She wasn't trying to be cold or mysterious, she just didn't know how to connect. Later that day, Yusa tries to talk to Shirosaki about how he thinks Kawai might actually be dealing with some quiet loneliness. He's hoping to get some deep advice, but forgets that Miharu scrambled Shirosaki's brain earlier. Instead of being helpful, Shirosaki starts rambling about his latest creepy plans involving college girls, completely missing the point. The next day at school, Yusa is back on his usual routine, secretly watching Kawai from a distance. But this time, he convinces himself that deep down, she wants someone to connect with, even though she looks totally content reading her book in peace. When classes end, he catches up to her on the walk home, pretending like it's casual. She clearly looks annoyed, but he ignores it and keeps chatting. Kawai finally asks if he's doing all this because of what she said the night before. She explains again that she honestly prefers being alone. But Yusa, in full delusion mode, convinces himself that she just needs more time to open up. She looks at the goofy excitement on his face and asks if he ever gets tired of being so involved with everyone at the hostel. When he says it actually feels nice connecting with people, Kawai realizes something: he's always been a little odd, which is probably why he fits in so well with that chaotic group. Trying to create some space, she walks a little ahead of him, hoping he'll finally understand and back off. But Yusa takes that moment as a win and decides to double down on his mission to help her open up. As the week rolls on, he sticks to his plan, completely missing how annoyed Kawai is getting. Meanwhile, Miharu and Sayaka start placing bets on how much longer it'll take before Kawai snaps. After school, Yusa heads to his usual spot, hoping to walk Kawai home again. But after waiting a while with no sign of her, he figures she's probably lost in another novel. So, he heads to the bookstore, and of course there she is, completely absorbed in a new book. Before he can say anything, two girls sneak up and give Kawai a mini jump scare. They start chatting and laughing about old school memories, and Yusa, watching from a distance, suddenly realizes Kawai actually has a life outside books. She's not some lonely shut-in like he imagined. But as the girls say goodbye, Kawai locks eyes with Yusa and instantly bolts the other way. Totally confused, Yusa chases after her, trying to play it cool by saying her friends seemed really chill. That's when she stops, turns to face him, and finally lets out the frustration she's been holding in frustration. He's been way too clueless to notice. Back at the hostel, Miharu finds Yusa curled up on the floor, crying his eyes out. She threatens to stomp on his head, but he just tells her to go ahead. That's when she figures out what's going on after all. She's been through her own love life disasters. She tells him straight up, never take Sayaka's advice seriously, because she's been messing with his head since day one. When Yusa asks why she didn't warn him earlier, Miharu responds the only way she knows how, by kicking him in the face for not picking up all the hints Kawai had been dropping. A few days later, Yusa finally gives up pretending to be Kawai's emotional bodyguard, but still enjoys walking beside her. When they reach the hostel, they both freeze. Right there at the entrance, Sayaka is aggressively trying to lock lips with Miharu. Yusa just shrugs and accepts it as normal at this point. Kawai, on the other hand, is done. She tells Sayaka to take that nonsense to her room, but Sayaka, clearly tipsy, tells her to chill. The smell of alcohol hits Kawai's face like a truck, so she asks why the two of them are drunk in the middle of the afternoon. After explaining that she found Sayaka already like this when she got back, Miharu begs her to quit the nonsense. But Sayaka, totally unfazed, tells her to stop being dramatic. It's just a friendly kiss, after all. As she leans in like she's about to plant one right on Miharu's face, Sumiko appears out of nowhere, wraps Sayaka's head in plastic, and calmly suggests it might be best if she joins her ancestors on the other side. A few minutes later, things calm down, and Sumiko pours Sayaka a cup of tea to help her settle. She gently asks why she was drinking alone in the first place. That's when Sayaka opens up. She says she bumped into her ex while out with friends and tried to avoid awkwardness by giving him a fake smile. But apparently, the guy took it as an invitation to clap her and tried to kiss her. So she did what anyone would, dockracked his whole generation with her heels, and for whatever reason, tried to wipe the kiss off by swapping spit with Miharu. Then Miharu, out of nowhere, says that guys always struggle to forget their exes. That prompts Yusa and the others to look at her sideways like, really? Coming from the girl who keeps crawling back to her own toxic ex. Trying to save face, Miharu claims she easily moves on from every guy after a breakup, but Sayaka calls her bluff, saying that's exactly why she keeps falling for the same type of guy over and over. She never slows down enough to actually learn from her mistakes. Kawai, agreeing with Sayaka, admits that it's probably why her brain turns to mush the second an ex calls her. But then Sayaka flips the script on her too, saying Kawai is even worse. While most girls just make a mental folder of their crush's info, Kawai overanalyzes everything down to the tiniest detail until she burns out and goes full loner mode again. Trying to defend herself, Kawai says at least she doesn't have toxic baggage like Miharu. But Sayaka hits back with a brutal truth: it's only because Kawai has never had a real relationship in the first place and still has her V card. After hearing Sayaka say that Kawai has zero dating experience, Yusa's brain short circuits. Suddenly, the idea that he might be her first real romantic connection completely takes over his mind. Seeing the spark in his eyes, Sayaka gets a mischievous idea and leans in to kiss Kawai. Right on cue, Yusa dives in to block the attack, but ends up taking the kiss on his arm instead, and immediately passes out like a knocked over mannequin. Meanwhile, Kawai, totally embarrassed, dashes to her room. As Yusa stumbles back to his feet, he goes chasing after her, while Sumiko calmly tells Sayaka to get ready for her next round of punishment. A few minutes later, Sumiko finds Yusa still waiting in the hallway. She tells him not to stress so much about how Kawai reacts, she's overthinking everything. But Yusa, being Yusa, keeps worrying that he somehow scared her off again. At dinner that night, Yusa and Kawai sit at the same table, but awkwardly avoid eye contact like a couple of middle schoolers. Eventually, Miharu has enough and snaps, telling them to just get a room already because watching them be awkward is driving her insane. The next afternoon, Yusa returns home only to get blasted in the face with a water gun by Miharu, who jokes that he shouldn't pretend her assets don't make him nervous. He claps back by asking if she couldn't afford plot armor to match her plot assessed, which earns him a water gun to the face. Just then, Shirasaki calls him to join the fun. He's about to decline, but when Miharu mentions that Kawai is enjoying herself even more than they are, his imagination instantly pictures her in a soaked swimsuit, and that only makes things worse. Moments later, Kawai shows up, wearing a raincoat. Miharu tries to apologize for getting his hopes up, but sees he's even more starstruck than before. Later, after drying off, Yusa notices one of Kawai's Kawai's books left on the table. Curious, he starts flipping through it to see why she's so hooked. A few minutes in, Kawai comes out and freezes when she sees him actually reading. She jokingly asks why someone with a brain the size of a peanut would even try something that dense. Yusa admits most of her books are way too complicated, but says this one's actually pretty funny and starts explaining a scene that made him laugh. Seeing how genuinely into it he is, Kawai is surprised and a little moved. She tells him to keep reading, then runs off, trying to hide the smile creeping onto her face. The next afternoon, Kawai finds Yusa sitting out on the porch, once again buried in one of her books. Curious, she asks how far he's gotten. But just as he starts talking, Miharu comes flying in and kicks him off the porch, yelling at him for trying so hard to impress Kawai. Yusa, totally annoyed, fires back and scolds her for always ruining his plans. What he doesn't realize is Kawai is still standing right there and hears everything. That's when it hits her maybe he was never genuinely interested in the book at all. Without a word, she walks away, clearly hurt. Later that evening, dinner gets boring real fast. To break the silence, Sumiko asks Kawai if she'd like to talk about one of her books, but Kawai instantly refuses, saying she doesn't want to give Shirosaki any weird ideas for his creative fantasies. So Sumiko turns to Shirosaki, hoping he'll come up with something instead. After all, he's written novels before, but his brain seems to be running on empty. That's when Miharu proudly steps in to save the moment and launches into a totally random story about an old man forcing his wife to charge his electric shaver. The others start joining in, each adding more absurd twists, and before long, the story spirals into a wild mess involving the old couple trying to cover Yusa in oil for unholy purposes. It turns into his worst nightmare, and by the end of it, everyone's laughing while Shirosaki, surprisingly inspired, decides he's going to write another novel. As Yusa lets out a huge yawn and says he needs a solid week of sleep, Shirosaki teases him asking if he's just tired from staying up all night reading Kawai's book. Hearing that, Kawai's heart does a little flip, but she hides it and starts to leave. Just as she turns away, Yusa stops her and asks a detailed question about the book. That one question sparks a full-on, lively conversation between them, something that rarely happens. Seeing this rare connection forming, Sumiko quickly grabs Miharu and Sayaka before they can ruin the moment with their usual chaos. While chatting about the book, Yusa ends up disagreeing with Kawai's interpretation of a certain scene. Hoping to fix it fast, he scrambles to get back on the same wavelength, but his brain short-circuits, and he ends up spiraling into a mini meltdown, cursing himself for messing up what felt like another rare moment with her. Meanwhile, Miharu and the others just stare in confusion. Kawai had been smiling the whole time. Was he seriously not noticing? A few days later, while walking home from school, Yusa apologizes to Kawai for being late on rent. She casually tells him not to worry about it. Miharu and Sayaka forget sometimes too. Suddenly, they hear singing nearby and spot Shirosaki loading bamboo into a truck. Back at the hostel, Shirosaki explains that he got the bamboo from a friend of Sumiko's after helping them cut it. When Miharu jokingly asks if he's going to turn it into a wishing tree, Sayaka snorts and tells her to forget it. No amount of wishes can fix her weakness for loser guy. Miharu immediately starts chasing her around the yard. Meanwhile, Shirosaki tells Yusa he's actually planning to make something for the local kids to enjoy. Then, Sumiko calls him over to take a phone call from the police. Naturally, the girls joke that he's finally getting arrested for being a weirdo, and Shirosaki almost wets himself, but it turns out to be about a purse he returned to the station earlier. The owner's coming by tomorrow to thank him. Sumiko teases that this might be his shot at romance since the purse belonged to a girl. But the next day, a little student named Chinatsu shows up with her mom. She's there to say thanks, but seems a bit tense. When Yusa asks why, Sayaka whispers that Shirosaki probably gives off middle-aged guy energy, trying to break the awkwardness. Sumiko offers Chinatsu some pudding. Her mom tries to decline, but Chinatsu insists she'll stay. Later, while Shirosaki continues working on his bamboo project, Chinatsu ends up chatting with him about it for ages before finally leaving with her mom. As she walks off, Shirosaki tells Yusa she likely won't be coming back. She probably has her own group of friends. But the very next day, Chinatsu returns, asking if the mini playground is done. He explains that adults have stuff to do, and asks why she isn't out with her own crew. She casually says her friends are boring and offers to stick around until it's finished. Days pass, and the two get more invested in building the playground. Meanwhile, Yusa, Kawai, and the others secretly watch from a distance, trying to figure out what Chinatsu sees in someone as chaotic as Shirosaki. They all agree there's no danger. He treats her more like a big brother. But just as they start to relax, Chinatsu suddenly confesses that she has a crush on him. Before anyone can panic, Shirosaki calmly says she should save those feelings for a few years later. After Shirosaki heads inside to help Sumiko with something, Miharu pulls Chinatsu aside to give her a reality check. She bluntly tells her that she's way too inexperienced to deal with someone as weird and unpredictable as Shirosaki. But Chinatsu isn't having it. She tells Miharu to mind her own business. Of course, Miharu ignores her and goes on, claiming their connection is full-on freaky behind the scenes. That's when Chinatsu claps back, asking if she's only into Shirosaki, because guys her own age have zero interest in someone who's past her prime. That hits a nerve. Miharu loses it, yelling that someone like Chinatsu, who keeps chasing after strange men, probably isn't cut out for friendship anyway. But the words land harder than expected. Chinatsu's eyes well up, and she suddenly runs off, tears falling down her face. Watching from the side, Yusa and Kawai are both disgusted by how childish Miharu acted. She scrambles to defend herself, but it's clear she crossed the line. The next evening at dinner, Shirosaki is noticeably bothered that Chinatsu didn't show up like she usually does. That's when Sayaka casually drops a clue about what went down. After getting cornered, Miharu tries to pin the blame on Yusa, but eventually admits she confronted Chinatsu and underestimated how deep her feelings for Shirosaki actually were. Still, everyone reassures him not to worry, she'll come back soon enough. But days pass and there's no sign of her. While walking home from school with Kawai, Yusa wonders what exactly Chinatsu saw in someone like Shirosaki. That's when they spot Chinatsu standing alone at a corner. Yusa thinks about going up to her, but then sees three girls approaching from the other direction. At first, he assumes they're her friends until they rush past her like she's invisible. That's when it clicks, she's alone. Probably always has been. Back at the hostel, Yusa and Kawai explain what they saw. Suddenly, it all makes sense. Chinatsu's emotions weren't just about Shirosaki. It was about being seen and finally feeling connected to someone. For once. A few hours later, Chinatsu's mom shows up at the front door, clearly worried. She says her daughter never came home after school and asks if anyone's seen her. The group quickly heads out to search. As Yusa grabs his bike and tells Sumiko where he's headed, a noise rustles from the bushes nearby. When he checks, he's shocked to find Chinatsu crouched and hiding there the whole time. They bring her back home, but Sumiko explains that she'll have to stay a little longer since her mom went far out looking for her. Wanting to lift the mood, Miharu tries to say only positive things but immediately ruins it by claiming that people don't really need friends. Sayaka, of course, jumps in and asks if she's just bitter from failing at relationships. Miharu then drags Kawai into the conversation, trying to prove that being a loner is fine. Curious, Chinatsu asks if that lifestyle is really as great as they make it sound. Kawai tries to explain the peace of being in her own world, but Chinatsu isn't convinced. She says it honestly sounds kind of depressing. That's when Kawai realizes she's not built for isolation. She admits her friends might be avoiding her because of something she did wrong. Chinatsu then opens up about the day she got upset over a bad grade and snapped at one of the girls who came to invite her to watch anime. After she ran off crying, the rest started distancing themselves, and now no one talks to her. Kawai explains that they probably felt hurt after she dissed something they loved. Miharu suggests she buy some candy and apologize, but Chinatsu says it's not that easy. Everyone at school avoids her now. Breaking down in tears, she says she can't take the rejection anymore and wishes she could disappear. Sumiko, without hesitation, snaps her out of it literally with a slap, then hands her a bowl of pudding and calmly tells her she needs to work hard to rebuild her friendships. Shirosaki, trying to cheer her up, promises to finish the playground in time so she can invite her classmates over. That lifts her spirits again. A few days later, Chinatsu returns, this time with her friend proudly announcing they've made up. Shirosaki excitedly takes them out back to unveil his noodle launching machine. After spending most of the day playing around, Sumiko brings out a massive bowl of pudding for them to share. Later that night, she gathers everyone to go over a public safety notice going around the neighborhood. Apparently, some creep's been flashing women and trying to grope them. As she reads the details, everyone slowly turns towards Shirosaki. The description matches him a little too well, but instead of being horrified, he looks like he's enjoying the attention way too much. While venting about how disgusting creeps are, Sayaka shares how someone tried to grab her chest on the bus recently. Miharu, never missing a beat, jokes that the guy was probably disappointed since she always wears layers to hide the size. Sayaka immediately chases her around the yard in full rage mode. Yusa turns to Kawai and asks if she's ever had anything like that happen. She says no, and the others pause in disbelief. She reminds them she never takes public transport, she just reads. But then, Sayaka brings up a time a heavy-set creep rushed past her in a bookstore, triggering a visible reaction in Kawai. That's when Miharu also remembers someone once grabbed her while she was reading at a library. Seeing Kawai's reaction, Yusa suspects she's been through something too, but she denies it. Still, Sumiko decides it's enough. Kawai is officially banned from reading while walking home. No more zoning out. Kawai begs for her reading privileges back, but Sumiko holds her ground until Kawai says Yusa will escort her home every day. That Sumiko agrees to. The next afternoon, Yusa tries to act chill as he walks home with Kawai, even though he's clearly over the moon. Just a few minutes in, he starts zoning out, lost in how pretty she looks, and secretly wishing this could last forever. When they reach the crosswalk, he becomes extra alert, but then feels something strange, and suddenly panics at the thought that he might be no different than the creeps she avoids. He quickly takes a breath and tries to reset. 3 nights later, Miharu starts teasing him, saying the tension between them is so obvious, it's giving him blue ball energy. Sayaka joins in, calling him out for trailing after Kawai like a lost puppy, but Yusa shrugs it off, saying he doesn't mind, it's worth it if Kawai feels safe and enjoys walking with him. The next morning, they get some big news. The neighborhood creep finally got arrested. Yusa is a bit bummed since it means the end of his bodyguard duties, but Kawai is thrilled. She rushes to the library, excited to finally read in peace again. Later that day, after Yusa gets caught sneaking a peek at her legs, Sumiko makes him clean the library with her until sunset. As time passes, he starts to wonder why Kawai hasn't returned. Just as he convinces himself she must be deep into another book, 2 girls come running up to Sumiko, warning her there's a new creep lurking at the underground passage Kawai usually takes. Sure enough, when Kawai walks into that tunnel later, the guy jumps out waving his junkenly. She's so lost in thought, she doesn't even notice. When he tries to stop her, Yusa appears out of nowhere and swats his hand away, only to realize the guy's size is tragically familiar. Right after, Miharu arrives, and Sayaka delivers a devastating kick to the groin before Shirosaki ties him up with his bandage skills. The police show up and drag the guy off. Back home, Yusa scolds Kawai for being careless. She says she could have handled it, so he asks her to insult him for practice. She just gets flustered and walks away, but moments later, she thanks him, promises to be more careful, and drags him into the girls section just to smack him with a wooden sword. A few days into summer break, Yusa gets bored lying around and briefly considers getting a part-time job, but when he sees Kawai returning from the library, he remembers he's already working full-time as a simp. Despite her usual cold response, he asks for book recommendations. She agrees, then walks off before he can bother her further. While wandering for something else to do, he finds Sumiko passed out from the heat. After she recovers, she suggests they all eat at her friend's restaurant. They drag Shirosaki along as the designated wallet. At the restaurant, Sumiko introduces her friend Ta, who explains she's struggling to run a second cafe ever since her last part-timer quit. She needs someone who can handle being around weird people without losing it. When they head into the dining area, they see Yusa suddenly transform, managing all his chaotic housemates like a pro. Ta realizes he's perfect for the job and waits until dinner's over to make the offer. To sell it, she tells him the other workers are fun and full of personality, but instead of sounding exciting, it makes him instantly reject the offer. He says he's already had his fill of unique people. Ta tries again, listing the weird nicknames her employees gave themselves, but Yusa still refuses. That's when Sumiko brings up the time everyone in school used to call him Freak Show. Before she can go further, he begs her to stop, but Miharu jumps in with wild guesses about what it could have meant, making him sound even worse. Then Sayaka grabs his phone and threatens to text the story to everyone in his contact. Defeated, Yusa explains that growing up with strange family friends taught him how to get along with oddballs, but that skill ruined his school life. He could only make friends with the most outrageous people, which earned him the unfortunate nickname. As the girls crack up laughing, Yusa silently thanks the universe that Kawai isn't like them, until she breaks into laughter too. Completely done, he storms out and firmly decides he is never working for Ta. Even after all his complaining, Ta shows up the very next day, and along with Sumiko's help forces Yusa into a polished traditional style uniform. As he tries one last time to turn down the job, Kawai walks in, freezes mid-step, and gets hit with a visual overload. Her eyes practically sparkle. She clearly wasn't expecting him to clean up that well. Yusa immediately picks up on her reaction and tries to act cool, like it's no big deal, but Kawai snaps back to her usual self and hands him a stack of books she picked out just for him. He realizes she must have stayed up late to choose the man just like that. He's fired up to read every single one. Sensing an opportunity, Ta and Sumiko team up again to stack the books and tie them with a neat ribbon to match the aesthetic. When they hand the bundle back to him, Kawai loses it all over again. She can't stop staring. That's all Yusa needs. He agrees to work for Ta, deciding that making Kawai look at him like that is 100% worth it. The next morning, Shirosaki sees Yusa still in full uniform before even heading to work and raises an eyebrow. Yusa tries to play it off, saying he's suddenly gotten into traditional fashion, but when he notices Kawai sneaking glances at him again, he immediately turns away, trying not to look desperate. Later that day, he arrives at the restaurant, where Ta gives him a name tag and introduces his new role. He'll be helping at a smaller cafe space behind the main one, filling in for her old favorite part-timer. Before they head out back, A few staff from the front come to wish him luck. In the cafe area, he meets his first coworker, Yamamoto, a wannabe samurai who talks like he's in a historical drama. While Yamamoto is rambling on, Kawai wonders how a guy with such a cool name ended up being such a goofball until Ta quietly mentions it's not even his real name. As Yamamoto continues monologuing, he leads Yusa inside, where they run into another staff member, Kurakawa. At first, Yusa feels relieved. Kurakawa seems normal, but the second he opens his mouth and starts talking about his guardian spirit, Yusa gets flashbacks to an old friend named Hayashi, who was obsessed with ghosts. The nightmare begins again. That night at the house, Yusa is sulking again, complaining that life just keeps hitting him harder than anyone else. But Miharu immediately shuts him down, saying he needs to stop whining, she's got it way worse. She vents about how all her friends went on a group date and didn't even bother to invite her. Kawai, just hearing the idea of a group outing, asks why anyone would willingly go on one, and the thought alone sends a chill down her spine. Yusa nods in agreement, saying he'd never join a friendship date, especially if it involves some sketchy karaoke bar. Right then, he gets a call from Kagami, yelling excitedly about a group date with some friends from another school. Before Yusa can even react, Miharu dives for his phone, reading the message aloud. Kagami then sends a photo of the girl organizing in, and Yusa admits she's kinda cute. But Miharu and Sayaka immediately start pointing out all the filters and makeup, saying she's trying too hard. As they zoom in and squint together, Yusa suddenly freezes. It's Hayashi, the ghost-obsessed girl who once haunted his school years. The trauma floods back. Just as he's spiraling, Kagami sends one more message. Hayashi doesn't want Yusa at the gathering. Brutal. The next day at the cafe, Yusa tries to understand how someone he once helped could go so far to avoid him. That's when he hears Kagami's voice and realizes the entire friend group has just walked in. Meanwhile, at the house, Miharu is tired of being too wholesome, so she starts bickering with Sayaka. Sumiko interrupts and suggests they go watch Yusa at work. After convincing Kawai, she even helps her dress up, and when she walks out, the others are stunned by how good she looked. Back at the cafe, Kagami is explaining how Yusa and Hayashi were classmates, but Hayashi quickly denies any connection, clearly trying to impress her new friend. Yusa still attempts to ask how she's been, but she brushes him off and disappears into the dining room with her group. A while later, Kurakawa returns from serving them and rants about how he'll never deal with snobby rich customers again. Yusa says he's not serving them either, but Yamamoto confidently claims he'll handle it. He returns minutes later, completely defeated. Then one of Hayashi's friends comes out, sees Yusa, and asks for him specifically. Just as Kawai and the others arrive, they're delayed at the entrance because Kawai's social anxiety kicks in. Inside, Hayashi's friends start noticing how off she's been ever since Yusa walked in. When they press her about it, she reveals his old nickname and claims she's avoiding his weird energy. They laugh, roast Yusa, and apologize to her for assuming they were ever close. As the teasing escalates, Kagami tells Hayashi to quit acting like they weren't classmates. Miharu and Sayaka whisper about why Yusa hasn't defended himself yet. That's when Kawai finally walks in and calmly tells Yusa to come with her. Her sudden entrance makes Hayashi's friends mock him even more, suggesting he must give VIP service to the local beauties. Before Yusa can react, Kawai casually says she does want the special service, then walks out like a boss. That's the last straw. Miharu and Sayaka switch to chaos mode, squishing themselves all over Yusa, claiming they miss his magic. While making the guys jealous, Sayaka rips off Hayashi's fake lashes by accident, and Miharu pulls Yusa aside for a crash course on self-respect. Fired up, Yusa rushes to the other room to give Kawai her special service, but gets crushed when Shirasaki tells him she panicked and ran home. Back at the house, Kawai sees that Sumiko made Yusa's favorite dish. Feeling bad, she quietly starts recommending where to begin in the books she gave him earlier. Yusa, trying not to smile too hard, listens closely. Of course, Miharu ruins the moment, claiming he's still thinking about her chest. A few days later, Yusa warns Kagami on a call to avoid getting obsessed with Miharu, just as she's going off on Shirasaki again in the background. After hanging up, Yusa sighs and wonders why she's having another full-on mental breakdown. Later that night, Miharu vents that no one her age is sitting at home alone like her. Determined to spread the misery, she tells Shirasaki to spill all of Yusa's embarrassing secrets to Kawai. But Yusa immediately tackles him to the floor to stop it, just as Sayaka and Kawai walk in, wondering what all the noise is about. While bonking Shirasaki with a bottle for dramatic effect, Miharu finally admits she's upset because yet another coworker got a boyfriend, leaving her as the only one at the office with no love life. Instead of comforting her, Sayaka asks if she's already started browsing cat adoption sites. That earns her more hits than Shirasaki took. A few moments later, the group asks why Miharu has been riding around on Shirasaki's back all day. She shrugs and says it's the only way she feels above anyone lately, since the rest of her life is in shambles. As she begins another rant about failed relationships, Sumiko walks in holding an old guitar. Sayaka instantly recognizes it as the one Miharu bought back when she first fell in love. The memory floods in, along with the heartbreak. So naturally, Miharu climbs up to the roof and launches into a sad rooftop concert to broadcast her pain. While Sumiko and Sayaka lay out a mat to enjoy the show like it's live theater, Yusa finds Kawai reading peacefully through the chaos. Curious, he asks how she can focus with everything going on. She explains that she's just used to it now. When he asks what life was like before moving into the boarding house, she softly says it was quiet. She used to live with her mom, but now she's working overseas. A few hours later, Miharu finishes her concert and surprisingly admits she might actually be the problem in all her failed relationships. Yusa, shocked to hear self-awareness for once, gently asks her to climb down. Then, Sayaka and Sumiko both share how they actually like having her around even if she's a bit unhinged. Shirosaki and Kawai join in too, telling her not to give up. Feeling supported, Miharu smiles and says she'll keep hoping for a miracle romance. That night, Yusa wakes up to loud screaming. When he rushes out, he somehow ends up face first in Kawai's chestnut, the worst place to be. Moments later, Miharu walks out too, wearing what can only be described as emergency pajamas, and Yusa nearly short-circuits from the surprise. Shirosaki finally stirs and asks what happened. Kawai explains that a monstrous centipede fell on her book while she was reading. Panicking, she ran to Sumiko's room, only to be met with horror dolls. Then she rushed to Miharu's room, tripped, and landed on her. She holds up a piece of cloth to show how huge the centipede was. Unfortunately, Miharu's night blindness made her think it was the actual bug, so the two screamed and ran again. Shirosaki tells them not to bother calling Sumiko, she won't be back until the next day. Kawai, completely losing her calm, begs for help, but since the guys aren't allowed in the girls section, Shirosaki tells them to handle it like strong, independent women. Desperate, Kawai turns to Yusa with puppy eyes, and he caves. They start with Miharu's room, but the place looks like a lost and found explosion, so they move to Kawai's room for air. While Shirosaki, Miharu, and Kawai search for the book it fell into, Yusa's mind goes into overdrive being in her room. Panicking, he quickly sits on the floor to stay calm. Finally, he gathers the courage to flip the book open, but the centipede is gone. Everyone nearly passes out. Miharu grabs Shirosaki and flees for her life, while Yusa sticks by Kawai like a guard dog. Just as they reach the porch, Yusa spots the centipede dropping from above, landing right on Kawai's back. He tries not to scream as it crawls onto her. She panics and grabs a kettle of hot water, about to dump it on herself, but Yusa grabs her just in time and ends up burning his hand while calming her down. Once she realizes it's already gone, Kawai finally relaxes. But then Miharu spots the bug and nearly passes out again. Sayaka saves the day by splashing it with hot water and bagging it up like a pro. After the chaos settles, everyone starts heading back inside. But just as Yusa turns to leave, Kawai notices a small blister on his arm. Without a word, she stops him and runs off to grab an ice pack like a worried mom. The next day, Yusa sees that Miharu is still feeling gloomy and tries to lift her mood. But before he can make progress, Kagami suddenly shows up asking about her. Sensing incoming disaster, Yusa immediately tries to chase him away for his own safety. That's when Miharu steps outside to investigate the noise. Wasting no time, Kagami whips out his best pickup line, which surprisingly boosts her confidence. But Yusa yells at him to keep walking, saying there's no way Miharu should even consider him, since he's still in the junior division. Miharu, of course, pretends she's way above doing something that desperate, and nobody buys it. The group quickly forgets the argument in favor of a more confusing issue. How does Yusa know so much about Kagami's anatomy? A few days later, Yusa tries reading one of Kawai's books in peace, but can't help dripping with nervous energy. Miharu and Shirosaki tease him, suspecting he's just using literature as an excuse to admire her. At the cafe, Yusa realizes he's actually enjoying work until Yamamoto and Kurikawa begin another bizarre debate, this time over a new bookshelf Ta just installed. While organizing books, Yusa starts daydreaming about inviting Kawai on a date, thinking she wouldn't be able to resist anything involving books. But the shelves aren't full yet, and Yusa feels like the universe might be handing him an opportunity. Just then, Sumiko calls Kawai to ask if she's willing to lend some books to Ta's cafe. Hearing about free coffee and an entire new library, Kawai quickly agrees. Later that day, Ta tells Yusa to wait outside while Shirosaki brings the books in. Curious, Yusa runs out to see what kind of flashy car Shirosaki drives. Turns out, it's a plain old wagon. Disappointed but not surprised, he he refocuses and starts unloading books. Inside, Kawai is already wide-eyed and tweaking out at the sight of so many neatly shelved books. Yusa watches, half concerned but mostly amused, before quietly handing her some tea. When he sees she's too immersed to hear him rant, he turns to the window only to spot Shirosaki standing out in the sun. Curious, he rushes over and asks what he's doing. Shirosaki, as serious as ever, says he's receiving punishment from the sun. Without hesitation, Yusa slams the window shut to avoid whatever nonsense is happening out there. But the weirdness continues when Shirosaki notices someone peeking through the window, Hayashi. When asked what she's doing, she says she's been feeling guilty since their awkward interaction a few nights ago. She then sits beside him and opens up about the time they were in school. She recalls one Valentine's Day when she wanted to give him chocolates, but overheard some classmates mocking her, saying he only spoke to her out of pity. She got embarrassed and instead made up a ghost story to avoid giving him the chocolates. As she finishes her story, Yusa suddenly rips open the window to yell at Shirosaki, only to be caught off guard when he sees Hayashi. Miharu and Sayaka sense drama and prepare to tag in, but Hayashi unexpectedly apologizes for how she acted and thanks Yusa for being the only person who ever spoke to her kindly. Touched, Yusa accepts the apology until Miharu smacks him for being too soft. Later, Hayashi heads to the bathroom to clean her makeup. Miharu and Sayaka, initially planning to roast her, hesitate when they realize she ditched her rich kid friends just to apologize. After freshening up, Hayashi brushes it off, claiming she can still attract plenty of guys with her looks. Miharu quickly crushes that delusion, telling her that makeup can't upgrade mid. Right on cue, Kurikawa appears with a toy she left behind and reminds her to respect her guardian spirit, which somehow makes her think she's found her ghost-obsessed soulmate. That evening, Kawai returns to the hostel holding one of her books. Sumiko asks if she enjoyed reading at the cafe, but she quietly says she barely read anything and walks straight to her room. The next morning, Yusa catches Kawai and starts asking her questions about one of the books she gave him. As she patiently helps him understand some tricky parts, Shirosaki and Miharu show up and joke that he's probably writing his own freaky novel. He quickly clears it up, saying it's just a summer assignment, and panics a little, hoping Kawai doesn't get weirded out by their usual nonsense. But luckily, she sticks around mostly because the book he's reading happens to be one of her personal favorites. While they chat, Yusa casually brings up how the cafe's gotten more popular thanks to her books. She gets happy at first, until he adds that Hayashi has also been coming in a lot lately. That makes Miharu side-eye the situation, especially since Kurikawa and Hayashi might be getting a little too friendly. Yusa then says, "Work's been a breeze lately," and heads out. After he leaves, Miharu points out that Yusa has been even more helpful and cheerful since he started the job. Before they can say more, Chinetsu shows up and says she's here to fix Shirosaki's loneliness by making him do all the work for her summer project. She complains about having no supplies, so he grabs some mud and even asks Miharu for one of her worn-out outfits to help smooth it. She smacks him, obviously. Later, while shaping mud balls, Shirosaki explains how old fabric helps with texture. After the drying session, he makes some soup and tells them Sumiko went out for an airman event. While chatting about Sayaka possibly being out on another date, Chinatsu perks up and asks for the juicy details but gets interrupted when Shirosaki notices one of Miharu's mud balls has cracked. They all head back out to polish the final batch, but Chinatsu is clearly distracted by all this talk of dating. Out of nowhere, she asks Kawai why she hasn't gone on a date with Yusa yet. Kawai, totally stunned, asks why she'd even think that's a thing. Chinatsu points out that Yusa gives her a lot of special attention, so there's got to be something going on. Miharu and Shirosaki are left speechless by how direct Chinatsu is. They joke that no one has ever dared say out loud what's been painfully obvious about Yusa's crush. But when Kawai shrugs it off, saying he probably just sees her as another weirdo he needs to babysit, everyone gets annoyed. She's obsessed with romance novels, yet she can't see the one happening right in front of her. Chinatsu admits maybe she misread everything, but then Kawai randomly brings up how Yusa also talks to Hayashi. Suspicious, Chinatsu asks if she's jealous. Kawai tries to deny it, but Chinatsu pushes harder until Miharu finally snaps and tells her to quit it. Later, Yusa comes back home and notices Chinatsu kneeling behind Kawai, looking gloomy. He tries asking what's wrong, but she gives him the coldest look ever and walks off. After Miharu explains that Chinatsu basically wrecked his love life, Sumiko returns from her decorative bread class. Immediately, Chinatsu says she'd rather learn that than do any more of Shirosaki's muddy art projects. While watching a pet show a few days later, Yusa asks Sumiko if they're allowed to keep pets in the hostel. She says it's fine, but Miharu refuses. She jokes that getting a pet might trick her into thinking she's not completely alone in life. Sayaka tells her to get one anyway, it'll make her less desperate for male attention. They bicker, of course. Miharu starts thinking maybe a rabbit could fix her, but Sayaka ruins it by saying she might be too old for love by the time it helps. As they argue, Yusa casually asks Kawaii if she prefers cats or dogs. She gives a cold, dismissive answer to dodge the conversation. Thankfully, Sumiko jumps in and changes the topic by asking what dog breeds she likes. Kawaii lights up and starts talking. Yusa tries to sneak into the chat, but Sayaka jokes that Kawaii should just take care of Yusa like her dream dog. Embarrassed, Kawaii runs off blushing. Just then, someone new shows up, a nerdy girl named Miharu. She asks for Sayaka, who runs over, surprised to see her. Turns out, Miharu was just nearby and casually asks if she can crash at the hostel for the night. As soon as Yusa and Mayumi start cracking up, she keeps trying to shove Miharu away, clearly annoyed. But then, Sumiko jumps in and tells Miharu she's welcome to crash in Sayaka's room for the night. On the way to the room, Miharu notices that creepy nail-covered bat in the hallway and casually brings up how Sayaka once used it to smash a shed. But Sayaka rushes in and slaps a hand over her mouth before she spills anything else. Still feeling awkward, Miharu tells them to just toss her bags back outside. But then Kawaii teases her, saying she shouldn't be embarrassed if she's still into boy love manga. That's when Yusa and Mayumi catch on Miharu clearly knows enough to finally mess with Sayaka's queen bee behavior. Curious, they drag her to the living room and ask how the two even met. Miharu starts telling them how she once saved Sayaka from a group of bullies back in school. But Mayumi cuts her off, saying she's not interested in hearing anything nice about Sayaka. Miharu shrugs and says it was more embarrassing than Hiro, especially since it involved a shed getting wrecked. Turns out, what really made the bullies back off was how terrifying Sayaka looked without any makeup. Then she explains how she got locked inside the shed once while trying to steal some eggs. As Miharu starts to get sleepy, she mutters about how Sayaka's always caught up dating both guys and girls. That last part totally shocks Yusa and Mayumi, realizing Sayaka's a total flirt. Right after Miharu knocks out cold, Sayaka quietly admits how much her friends mean to her, then gently tucks her in for the night. The next day, Sayaka wakes Miharu up early for her high school reunion and spends the whole morning glamming her up so her old crushes would totally regret ever dumping her. After the long makeover session, Miharu thanks Yusa and the others for letting her stay. But once they see Sayaka's crazy makeup skills, they're all secretly horrified, wondering what monster might be hiding under her layers of makeup. 3 days later, Sumiko heads to Sayaka's room to wake her up because the bunny she's been babysitting for a friend has vanished. Sayaka groggily tries to get up, but the moment she spots the bunny, she freaks out, bolts from the room, and ends up crashing right into Yusa. He almost screams, because her bare face in the morning is downright terrifying. The next day at the school library, Yusa spends a few minutes trying to get Kawaii's attention. She finally answers, totally absorbed in a book she says is the best she's read all year. On the way back home, she's still glued to it, and Yusa just walks beside her, silently staring like always. When they reach the crosswalk, he gently holds her back, pretending he's only trying to be protective. But when they reach the house, Mayumi notices his weird expression and jokes, asking if he finally got lucky with her. Kawaii suddenly looks panicked, so Yusa assumes she's mad about him holding her back. But before she can explain, it was just an intense scene in the book. Mayumi's already whacked him in the head. Sumiko then asks what the book's about, and Kawaii starts explaining it all excitedly, something that surprises Yusa, since she never talks to him like that anymore. The following day, Yusa can't stop overthinking whatever's going on between him and Kawaii, while watching her quietly read in the library. That's when Kawachi steps in and reminds him they actually have a job to do. Just then, a girl named Maimura walks up to Kawaii and tries to talk to her, but Yusa notices that Kawaii is totally zoned out in her book world again. Hoping to snap her out of it, he walks by super loud and dramatic, but ends up totally regretting it. Instead of giving her usual icy attitude like she does with most people, Kawaii actually starts chatting with Maimura and keeps it going. Turns out, they both vibe over their love for books. Over the next few days, Maimura slowly takes over all of Kawaii's free time. She even snags their usual walk home. While they're walking, Maimura starts throwing out questions about life at the hostel. And when Kawaii casually mentions that there are some guys living there too, Maimura straight up asks if she has a thing for any of them. Kawai quickly says no, but Maimura doesn't let up and asks to visit the place. Yusa, who's been low-key following them from a distance, panics and runs ahead to get there before they do. When he gets home, he makes up a wild story about a party going on nearby with a bunch of good-looking doctors. As soon as Kawai arrives with Mayumura, Mayumi and Sayaka come out wearing their flashiest outfits and say they're heading out, telling her not to wait up. Meanwhile, Yusa, who's just finished tying up Shirosaki, again, starts feeling down, realizing he might not matter to Kawai at all. Later, that evening, everyone's stunned when Kawai's phone rings since she literally never gets messages. Turns out, it's Maimura texting her again. Yusa gets even more depressed, knowing she's now doing something he's always wished for. But after a few days of constant texting, he finds Kawai looking drained and wonders if this new friendship is really all that fun. The next day at school, Maimura invites her to hang out with some book-loving friends. Kawai tries to say no, but Maimura insists they'll click. In the end, Kawai gives in and says, okay. But then, out of nowhere, plans shift, and Mayumura takes Kawai to meet a couple of guys at the train station right around the same time Sayaka comes back from another one of her dates. When she walks into the house a few minutes later, she spills all the tea, and Yusa immediately starts freaking out. He knows Kawai isn't the kind of girl who's cool hanging out with random dudes. Meanwhile, Kawai just found out that Maimura brought her out for a karaoke hangout, and now she's starting to spiral, trying to figure out a way to dip out quietly. Back at the house, Yusa's imagination runs wild and pictures her already fighting off some sketchy guy. But Mayumi tells him to chill and reminds him that Kawai is more capable than he thinks, even though he's still panicking hard. Kawai finally gathers up the courage to ask Maimura if her so-called bookworm friends really read like she claimed. As soon as Mayumura says yes, a guy named Mitsui jumps in, confidently claiming he's a die-hard book fan. Then, to prove it, he blurts out his favorite part from a novel that Kawai just started reading recently. That catches her attention for a moment, so she listens in. But then he ruins it by going off about how some girl who only reads fashion magazines tried talking to him, and how people who don't read real books shouldn't even bother asking him for recs. As he keeps ranting, Kawai starts remembering how Yusa used to ask her for help understanding the stories she liked. Then, Mitsui suddenly asks her if she agrees that non-readers are a waste of time. Without missing a beat, Kawai says absolutely no and explains that making someone feel dumb just for trying to learn something new is just plain wrong. Right after that, Maimura tells Kawai to chill a bit. She tries to apologize, but then Maimura gets way too touchy, rubbing her head and saying he likes her fiery side. Kawai pulls away, clearly uncomfortable, but he tries pulling her in again. That's when she breaks free and runs off the second her phone buzzes. When she checks it, she sees it's from Mayumi, but the next message reveals it's actually Yusa using Mayumi's phone to check in. She texts back, saying tagging along with Maimura was a bad move, but assures him she's fine. Just then, Maimura comes out, asking her to go back inside, but Kawai decides she's done and hops on the next bus home. When she gets off at her stop, she runs into Yusa, who says he didn't want her walking home alone at night. They walk back together, and he notices her overstuffed bag, asking how her hangout went. She starts venting about how stressful the past few days with Mayumura have been. Yusa brings up how she once snapped at him for trying too hard to be close, which makes her a little embarrassed. She blames him for it and then asks if she's supposed to do the same with Mayumura. Yusa suggests maybe just being a bit more chill. Mayumura probably just wanted to be friends. Next day at school, Maimura tries to set up another hangout, but Kawai shuts her down fast, asking why she tricked her. Maimura admits she lied because she knew Kawai wouldn't agree if guys were involved. She even says she was trying to match her up with Mitsui since he's been talking about her non-stop after she posted their selfie in the group chat. Kawai is confused and asks what selfie she's talking about. Maimura explains she snapped one during the week. Kawai totally loses it and tells her never to do something like that again and to stop forcing her into things she's not okay with. Realizing she wasn't exactly subtle, she tries apologizing, but Maimura beats her to it and confesses she had a falling out with a friend recently because of acting on impulse. Kawai tells her she should start by apologizing to that friend too. That night, back at the hostel, Kawai finally gets her peace and quiet again, but something feels off. She notices this weird emptiness inside when Mayumura doesn't text her at their usual time. The next evening, Yusa finds her still sitting in the library, clearly waiting. He gently reminds her it's already past closing. As they head down the stairs, they spot Maimura running past. Kawai pauses and hears her telling two new girls that she's just not good at staying close with people. Later, while walking home with Yusa, Kawai suddenly starts crying. When he tries to comfort her, she insists she's just reacting to a sad part in her book. But Yusa can't help but worry she might be slipping back into a funk. Once they get home, Mayumi has her own meltdown over not being invited to some mixer, which instantly reminds them their lives already have enough chaos. So they all freshen up and hang out in the living room, sipping plum juice with Sumiko and the others. Sadly, they had to go with the non-alcoholic version, since real wine would have totally wrecked their baby-level tolerance. After Sumiko talks about how her friend aged that plum juice for over 5 years, Mayumi starts thinking back to the guy she dated around that time and suddenly gets hyped remembering how well-equipped he was. Naturally, she starts bickering with Sayaka like always. Meanwhile, Kawaii snaps, frustrated that even someone like Sayaka somehow has friends, despite being a complete menace. Mayumi tries to calm her down, but then realizes wait, Kawaii's actually drunk. The moment Kawaii hits the floor, Yusa can't help but let his imagination run wild, thinking maybe this is finally his big chance to get close. But the girls immediately pull her away to keep her safe from whatever he was plotting. Feeling bad, Mayumi tries to entertain him with a little performance, but he just gets more annoyed and begs for brain bleach to wipe the cringe. Out of nowhere, Kawaii turns to Sayaka and tells her she doesn't deserve someone like Miharu as a friend, calling her an even bigger mess than Mayumi. Then she blurts out how unfair it is that she can't make a real friend who just gets her. Sumiko hands her a glass of water and tells her to spill whatever's on her mind. Kawaii finally talks about everything that went down with Maimura. After hearing it all, Mayumi straight up tells her that friendship wasn't going to last anyway. Then Sumiko and Sayaka take turns, explaining how just liking the same stuff doesn't mean someone's right for you. As Kawaii reflects, she suddenly remembers Mitsui and gets mad that she didn't knock out his goofy front teeth. When the girls ask if they had a big argument, she says it didn't get that far. Yusa lets out a breath of relief and says he's glad she doesn't lose her temper easily, only to get yelled at right after for never standing up for himself. She even scolds him for still putting up with Hayashi and not cutting her off after how rude she was. He asks if she really wants him to stop talking to Hayashi for good, but she tells him to quit dodging the topic. Suddenly, she stands up and says she wants snacks. Sumiko tells her to forget it, it's way too late. Kawaii sulks at the table until Yusa offers to grab something from his stash. Just as he stands up, she grabs his shirt and says she's coming, with giving him hope that this might be his moment. Too bad for him, Mayumi and Sayaka show up and crash the scene, leaving him stuck sleeping in the living room while they pass out in his bed. The next morning, Kawaii wakes up with full-on regret mode as everything from the night before hits her all at once. She spots a notebook tucked between her favorite book on Yusa's desk and starts reading it. Meanwhile, Yusa's hiding behind the door, silently begging she doesn't notice the box he hid underneath. When Mayumi wakes up and tries to get a peek at the notebook, Kawaii bolts. Yusa grabs it and chases after her, only to find her laughing at how goofy his notes were. After letting her laugh it out, he shyly asks if she'll keep sharing feedback after each chapter as a fun way to talk about books. Kawaii blushes and runs off. But Yusa doesn't give up. He catches up and nervously asks for her number so he won't need Mayumi's phone next time. Right after, he panics and acts like it's totally cool if she says no. Luckily, she shares her contact and runs off to avoid Mayumi, who's now yelling at Yusa for turning her safe zone into a romance zone. With Kawaii's number now saved, could Yusa finally have a chance clap Kawaii? Tell me in the comments, Yusa would clap Kawaii or not. That's it for today's video. Watch the following video, and I will see you in the next one.